First of all, anything in extremes is not good for the world. Therefore, low oil may be good for India, but an extremely low oil is not good for anybody. And therefore, a balance of sorts is crucial. And it is here that I feel that we run the risk of commodity cycle taking the prices of commodities downward with the risk of going to the extremes. Balance of politics and economics will play out, and we have to be careful, because at times when situations become extreme, countries and politicians take extreme positions, and India has to prepare itself for that world and build a strong domestic macroeconomic foundation, and in many ways be able to sustain itself much more on its own strength rather than depending on props from other countries.
But we are not immune, Mr. Kotak, over here, and also you've seen how China has rattled our Indian markets.
Correct.
How do you see the Indian markets, which also in some ways is a yardstick of the overall economy?
I think it's a classic transformation of capital account into P&L account. P&L account takes time, but India is benefiting $80 to $100 billion a year on P&L account. But capital account, we are likely to see outflows, because even now India is clubbed with emerging markets, and emerging markets have not performed well over the last 5 years, and therefore investors globally are withdrawing money from emerging markets.
So investment cycle pick up, credit offtake, and also the earnings cycle picking up. We had been putting milestones, but that's getting pushed really to further and further. Where do you see all this really converging?
My view is this is a time which we have to sustain what I call as a steady growth. Don't try and run the car too fast. At the same time, if we keep a steady growth and really focus on the nuts and bolts, on execution, on getting pockets of reform done, I think this is a phenomenal long run marathon in India's favor.
What are the three things the Indian government should do? Budget is also around the corner.
I think it's first and foremost, I do believe fiscal prudence is important, and we should not lose that discipline. Second, I think the key is supply side bottlenecks, and we need to declog the Indian system. And third is, in some areas, in addition to reform, move towards liberalization.
Debt has been a big issue, and you have said in the past that because the cost of funding is not coming down while the inherent asset has been depleting, or if not stable, depleting. So in that scenario, do you think RBI should bring down the interest rates further, and do you see that happening in this financial year?
I think on that we are running it in a two-speed engine. Producer inflation, which is WPI, is at a different trajectory than CPI, and the consumer sees CPI. The corporate sector and business sees WPI, and the difference between these two is now 7 to 8%. And we need to ensure that we are able to adjust to this two-speed engine. And nominal GDP, which used to be 13%, is now 6 to 7%. And Indian business has to be clear that in the times like this, excessive leverage is not good.
So what can the banks and the overall economy do? Do you think that RBI's that set deadline, March 2017, is that feasible, even though you're not in that category?
My sense is that excessive leverage has to get good answers. By postponing, by lending and pretending, we are not going to get sustainable solutions.
So, Mr. Kotak, help me understand. You started your career by corporate financing to Nelco and Mahindras. Now, what was it, 7 cents, that you did not go whole hog on the corporate lending side and focused more on retail?
We believe that corporate lending with prudence is good business even today.
Okay.
But we have to be a little careful about not going overboard. Being prudent is extremely important, not only for the banker, but also for the corporate.
And do you think that you still see some opportunities on corporate lending side, and would you be taking advantage of this?
Of course. No, I think corporate lending to well-managed corporates who have not gone on a binge of leverage is a good segment to be in. And we are focused on building capacity both in the physical and the digital world.
Mr. Kotak, you have worked very closely with the promoter class in India, and you now call it the Lala class as well to some extent. Now, do you think when you said that the institutional evolution of institutional form of business is what should evolve, so out of this debt crisis, is that the only solution, and are we seeing a death of promoter class in India to some extent?
My view is the Lala class must institutionalize, because time has come where you don't have to fix the system. You got to be great at execution and building institutions. I think what India today needs is institutional frameworks where Lalas have to bring the entrepreneurial energy to institutionalize their firms.
Kotak is also doing a little bit of that with Canadian Pension
Right.
Fund. And how focused would you be, and do you think that this class is going to really emerge for that whole cleanup operation?
I am pretty clear that the future is professional entrepreneurs backed by institutional money.
And talking about Kotak in particular, you did a large acquisition. ING Vaisya may have certain portfolios in this particular regard. Is there any concern? And Mr. Kotak, would you also be proactive in provisioning at this point on that account?
Nisha, after the first quarter post-merger, we disclosed to the marketplace all the stress and the soft accounts which we saw post the acquisition. Therefore, we have made full disclosure to the market. We have given reasonable estimates of the level of provisioning which is needed in that portfolio.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.